Alright, so I just started installing my Ron Francis wiring. I got the system MK-97A. That's for the 4.6 32 valve Ford motor. Mine's from a 99 Mustang Cobra SVT. So, we had a little interview on the phone when I ordered it. They asked me handful of questions. It was pretty simple, and then they sent me what they thought I needed, and so far it's been pretty accurate. In addition to that, I've got the Ron Francis Express chassis wiring system. It's a 16 circuit system. So this is generally the engine wiring block, and then this is the wiring, as I understand it, for everything else. So this thing, like I said, has 16 circuits, 4 of which are, you can choose the position of whether or not you want them battery powered or ignition powered, which is kind of cool. So if there's something you want to have power all the time, you would move the fuse over there and set it up that way. This is all mounted in my trunk. I flattened out the bottom of my trunk with plywood and a couple other things underneath it that you can't really see. There's some hickory under there that's attached to the excuse me, to the body, and then the plywood attaches to it. I've carpeted it all. This plywood panel that isn't carpeted yet is just sitting in there. I need access to the fuel tank to get to the fuel pump, get to the fuel pump wiring, get to the fuel pump hose connections, and if ever I had to take the fuel tank out. So this panel will be removable. I'm going to cut it down a little bit more now that I know how much room the carpet takes up, and carpet it, and it will just fit in there nice and snug, and it'll get screwed down with some exposed fasteners. But should look pretty good. I'm not too concerned about how the trunk looks. I just need it to perform pretty well, and I think this will. I think I'll even have room in there for a spare if I choose to carry a spare. Anyway, so I've got my the terminal block for the engine, for the chassis, and then this is the computer that I bought with the engine. It was in the donor car that I got the engine and transmission from, so it's the same one that's always been with it. And I'm going to either make a mount for it, or if I can find one to buy, maybe buy one just so that thing gets attached somehow over there. Most of my wiring I'm bringing in through here, and I'll show you a little more on that in a second. So what I did is, when I opened up the box of Ron Francis stuff, read through the instructions, which I know they tell you to do that and nobody probably does it, but it is actually helpful because at least you get an idea of what's going on. Then I laid out all the bags in here in numerical order. And it'll skip a bunch of numbers because they only sent the bags that are applicable to my application. So there's plenty of bags that aren't here, but these are the ones that I needed. And then you go through this process, and it starts you with bag number 60, which is right here, and you run it. In this case, it's from the mass airflow sensor. So you just hook it to the mass airflow sensor. And at first I was running all the wires back here and just laying them over the trunk and out the back of the car. They're plenty long enough. But then I realized pretty quickly the capacity of the holes that I was using in the firewall. They just weren't going to cut it. I was using the old heater holes, and I'm going to block them off, and I ended up drilling a 2-inch hole right behind my where my heater box from Classic Air, where that's all going to be located, and it seems like a pretty central location. So let me show you with the inside of the car what I've done. All right, so back there on the, behind the back seat, I put in a 2-inch grommet, and it's a plastic grommet, and it's really just held in with the soundproofing material, but it seems to work out perfect. I'm using 2007 Mustang Cobra seats, and the seats work really well in here. And once the back seats are in, there's a gap back here, so all my wires will come up and in through here, and they'll travel under this hollow part, and then under a center console that I made, which will be in another video. But I've made the box for the center console, and let's see. So it's hard to see it, but on the tunnel there's a black line. You can see it right here. So I set my console down and I trace that line. That's the outside edge of the console. The console box is a 1/2 inch thick. So I know when I run the wires across the tunnel that I need to keep them up here and not get into that line or even within a 1/2 inch of this plane. So they're going to stay up here and be somehow attached to the tunnel, probably honestly just taped. I don't want to poke a bunch of holes in it, and they're going to be covered with carpet, and or maybe not carpet, but they're certainly going to be covered with the center console, so they'll be completely protected. And I do want them to be somewhat accessible if I ever had to get at it in the future. So going back to the wiring path, we'll go out front here. It's a little hard to see, but back there in the center is a 2-inch hole that I drilled, and then I put a 2-inch plastic grommet in it, like you'd put in a desk. It's only temporary. I just did it so that today I don't scrape up the wires. I've ordered a 2-inch rubber grommet that will fit over the sheet metal, and it's really a boat grommet, but it's going to be perfect for this application. So it'll sit right there, and all of these wires that I've run so far are going to run through it, in addition to the wires I'm getting ready to run, which will be for the lights and the alternator and the starter and just everything else under here that isn't really related to starting and operating the engine. So now that all of that's in, back up here. Now that all that's in, the name of the game is kind of clean it up. I've run all the wires, all the connectors, for example, to the injectors on both sides. This wire coming up here, I don't know if that's on video. Yeah, this wire coming up here is for the cam position. This wire is a temperature sensor. So as these things come together, I'm starting to just wire tie them with a little wire tie, and then I'm going to put a cover on all of it to the extent I can, and just try to get it all working its way back to that one mass of wire that goes through the firewall, and I'll tape it up. So at the end of the day, you could unhook everything and pull that whole harness out, and it will go back in generally the same way that you removed it. And it should be a nice, clean installation. One thing I learned is, if you haven't already, go ahead and remove the lower plenum, because there's 2 wires that go to the NOx sensors. They're right under there. The NOx sensor cable from Ford, like that part of the wiring harness just gets deleted completely, like everything else. I was hoping that there'd just be some plug that plugged into it, but there isn't. You have to plug in directly to the knock sensors, so you have to remove that. Other than that, it's been pretty simple. Having the upper intake off is obviously very helpful also, because you can't get it this side of the motor at those injectors with the throttle body and everything sitting out over here. So it's, unfortunately, mine was already off, so I didn't have to worry too much about that. So the next phase of this are the other bags that that come with the kit. I'm finished with all the numbered bags, so now I'm moving on to bags that I'll grab one and show you. They have the instructions for each bag inside the bag. So, for example, this is bag E. So it's for the turn signal, brake light, and horn switch. And the instructions are inside. It says right there. So you open up these bags one at a time. You read the directions for that bag, and you just do it. And what I found works really well is to hook up the wires and run them out in front of the car. And just stretch them out. Go ahead and unwind them. Run your hand down them to get as much of the curl out of the wire as you can, and stretch them out. And then once I had enough that I felt like for the engine wiring, I did about 50% in one bundle and 50% in another bundle. So I just went ahead and stretched them out front. Started putting pieces of tape like near the firewall about every, I don't know, 18 inches. And when I got to near the end, I cut all the wires just so they're all the same length. And when it comes to feeding it through these grommets, it's a little easier if you don't have a bunch of little stray wires. And there's plenty of wire to do that. I got the long kit, so I have a gracious plenty of wire. So I still have some loose wires in here. This is the, let's see. Oh, this is the left cam location wire, and then there's the right one. This wire under here was just, I didn't realize how close I was to the end when I put those two bundles together, so this was just, I only have one more bag to go and didn't realize it. And then under the dash, I've got the data port bundle kind of hanging there. That's where I decided to mount that OBD2 port under my dash, sort of where it would be on a normal car. And we'll use that for talking to the computer and changing the tunes on the car, because the tuner will plug into that OBD2 port. So anyway, now I'm going to get going on the next chunk of wiring and just see how it goes. More video to come.